Now we're going to take a look at the forward and overrun clutch drum assembly. This is the part that was removed from the transmission with it bolted to the rear of the housing. So what I want to do here is I just want to remove all these bolts so we could have a flat surface for laying on the ground, or I should say on the tabletop. So we've already discussed the sprag, the reverse sprag that's in the rear of this drum. It's only able to rotate one way. In the video description, you're going to see more links on disassembling and inspecting the drums, which are mostly assembled with fiber clutch plates and steel plate liners. So the first thing we want to do is remove this C-clip, and then we have an additional C-clip. So this, you don't really need any special tool. As you can see, you can simply just pop it out with a screwdriver. What's important is you don't want to stretch these or compress the C-clip beyond its limitation, because remember, it has to hold this clutch assembly in location. So this is all the clutch pack and steel liner for the forward clutch assembly. So when we take a look at these, we can see the clutches are still in good condition. And just like before, we want to take a look at both sides of the steel plate, making sure there is no dark spots, because that will signify that the clutch is burning against the steel plate. So we're just going to pack this to the side. Most of the time you want to make sure you seat this stuff in fresh, clean transmission fluid. Now we're going to go in and remove the overrun clutch. So that's the C-clip for holding the overrun clutch assembly into place. So we're going to place this in the way we took it out. And that's all the clutch for the overrun. This is known as a wave plate. If you notice, it has kind of a concave to it. What it does is when this piston on the outside, there's two pistons in here. There's one for activating the clutches. When it pushes for locking the clutch against the steel liner, this wave plate will absorb or make this shift cushion so it does not burn the clutches and the steel plate. So we're going to take a look at these. Now when we look at these clutch plate, we can see it's still in good condition. So most of the time they are reusable, but since you're in here, it's always best to install new ones. The steel plates you don't really have to change. Now the main reason we're going in here is for taking an inspection at the rubber seal for the piston. So we have another C-clip in here that we're going to have to get removed. And once that gets removed, this whole assembly is going to pop up. So what we need to do is we need to retain that piston. We need to push it down so we can get that C-clip, which is right here. Most likely be difficult to see from where you're at. But let's take a close-up on it. And you can see it's, the edge of it is right here. So what we have to do is we have to install our tool for pushing the piston down, relieving that C-clip so it could be released. And then we could take an inspection on the piston rubber seal. Now there are specialty tools that you could order when you look in the service manual for compressing this spring and removing it. But what I like to do is, you know, I'm always inventive. I'm going to use this tool that we use for removing the harmonic balancer. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place a wrench on it, place 2 wrench, and I'm going to place it through the bottom. And you're going to have it like that. Then I'm going to use this PVC, placing it on top. So, and you're going to try to screw that into there. So the shaft, the threaded shaft is not long enough. That's why I like to use one of the wrench. Placing the assembly back. So you're going to see what's going to happen when you keep removing this forward drum. This sprag is going to want to fall out, and you have to keep it in location because these seals are very critical that they maintain their compression state. Because if you keep it out of there, what's eventually going to happen is the seal is going to expand and you're going to have problems removing it. So this is a PVC pipe. I like to use a PVC pipe because using a metal sometimes could just destroy that plate inside there. So the goal here now is we want to center this PVC plate, position it so we could get our tool down in there on the side for popping that ring out. Now I just want to turn this over and use my tool for turning the shaft. So by turning the shaft, it's going to compress the PVC pipe onto the piston spring. Now this is going to become difficult. That is why it's always good to have the tool. And also you have to remember to not damage any of the part. Okay, so that was a bad idea using these wrenches for placing in the back here because we don't want to cause any damage in this area. So I created this flat stock that I'm going to place. And I'm going to place the threaded shaft through it. Placing our PVC pipe for compressing the piston. And I just want to run this onto there. I'm going to take my tool, place it on the hex, and what I want to do is just make sure this is centered. So you're getting the idea of what I'm trying to do here. Now you don't have to do this. I'm just trying to show you removing the piston inside this forward drum, what it looks like. So when you're going to turn the shaft, what it's going to do is it's going to compress that spring and the piston in there for you. So we want to take our screwdriver and just pass it in there to make sure that the C-clip has no pressure on it. So that we have accomplished. Now it's just a matter of time of playing with this and popping that C-clip out, and then we could release our tool. So there you can see we have the C-clip removed. Now for beginners, this is going to be difficult. Once you become a professional transmission guy, you don't really need the tool anymore because you have experience. And that is what's most important when it comes to disassembling these parts, you will know what's required for disassembling. Okay, so I had to take a run for a second screwdriver to continue the removal. Now the issue that we're dealing with here is that the PVC ring is so small. Now you see I have that C-clip out and it's just dancing there. But we're able to get it out, and that's what's important. Now, like I said before, there are professional tools for doing this. You really don't want to copy what I'm doing here because you might get hurt. But like I said, once you have experience, it's going to be a piece of cake. So by releasing this shaft, what's happening there now is the piston is pushing up because the C-clip has been removed. So you're going to have to be careful here. Sometimes when you release the tool, all this stuff could just go flying out across the shop. And that's when things starts to look funny. So I'm going to place my hand in here just to prevent that part from flying across the room. But as you're turning this threaded shaft, you're going to come to realize that it's getting easier to turn. So that's a sign that it's not going to fly across the room. So now we're going to remove our customized tool, get the C-clip out of the way. Now this is the piston. Actually, this is what gives the compression action. So when the hydraulic fluid is allowed into the passageway, that will be from the back here. You have these holes that hydraulic fluid will enter from, not where the bolt holes go. You have these additional holes. That's hydraulic fluid will go into there, and on the side you will notice you have a bleed off right here. So once that fluid goes in, it pushes the pistons forward. This spring is going to be compressed. The reason it's compressed is when the solenoid disengages, that's the shift solenoid, the hydraulic pressure will drop, and this spring will be able to push the piston back down, relieving the clutch and disengaging those gears. So we're going to continue and go in. So we're going to have to use our screwdriver and try to find a way to walk it out. It's not something easy that you could also take it and just flip it around like that. So we can see it's moving forward. And there it goes, it falls out. So this is our piston. You see that's the rubber seal. This is what you're going to need to inspect. What you want to do is you're going to remove it, try to flex it around. So there's an outer and inner seal. Right now I can tell you they're in very good condition because by feeling the edge, the surface, you could feel that the seal has a little lift to it. So that's a good thing. So is this one. So this will all be cleaned up, lubricated with transmission oil, and reassembled. Now that piston travels inside of here, and this is also another piston because you can see on the inside there is another inner seal that seals against the one-way sprag, and here you will see there's another piston, that's the outer seal. So this is all in good shape. Now when we go to the back here, this is the sprag that could be removed, so you could get a good idea of what we're dealing with. Now we have 4 seals here, like I said before, and we have a thrust bearing. All this has to be inspected, making sure you have a smooth running. And if the bearing is damaged or pertaining to damage, you're going to find a little Mallory in the area where it seats. So that's going to be a sign of the bearing needs to be replaced. Careful inspection has to be taken inside here. You're going to see there's a bearing. There's a bushing right here. It's a hard Babbitt bearing. And if you take a real close look in there, you're going to see it has little holes in it. And what those holes are, they're not holes, they're cavity, is for holding transmission fluid while the sprag is rotating in there. So all that's going to be need inspection. Like if we take a look on this side, you're better to see it. I'm talking about this right here. Very important. Sometimes this will be damaged. This is like you will compare it to like an engine bearing, a connecting rod bearing. But this could be pressed out of there. This one is in very good condition. You will be able to know because you see the line. It still has the line. If those lines and those dots are worn out, that's a sign you have to replace it. So the next part is we want to take this C-clip out of here. And this is for removing the sprag and the bearing. So this is something you really don't want to mess with because the ball sometimes could fall out. So you want to take a careful inspection of this. And like I said before, you want to look for mallery that develop on the cage. In this case, we have not that much, but this is still good. Now we have another C-clip that could be removed, and you're going to see it's right here. So you have to remember how these parts go together. That's why you have this video to look at it. And this is another roller bearing that you want to take a look at. And when you take a look at in here, see there's passageway for lubricating those needle roller bearing. But you want to blow that out with some air, making sure there is no blockage or contaminant in there. So we're going to place that back. We're going to replace our C-clip. Now when you're replacing these C-clips, you have to make sure that they're seated perfectly in the groove. Because if they're not, once the transmissions go into function, they could pop out of location. So we want to sit this back the way we took it out. Now this is going to be, you have to get all those sides in on the bearing. So this is a sprag. It's not really a roller. These are not rollers. They're like half rollers because they only should be rotating in one direction. So it's very tricky to install. So you see what could happen. So this is going to take some time. You just have to take your time and fit all the blocks in. There you go. So now we're going to place our C-clip back. This stuff is pretty soft. You see, you can do it with your hands. And actually, you have to place this first. So let me place our C-clip in location. And like we always said, you want to make sure you always have this sprag in here. So when you replace it, you want to make sure it has a forward action. It does not go backward. If it goes backward, then you have a problem with that cage half bearing that we just replaced. Now on this part of the transmission, the clutch, you will have your retainer plate. There's going to be your low and reverse brake assembly. Those are the clutch pack that's inside the transmission case. In the video description, when we disassemble the transmission, I showed you that part. Those clutches are fitted onto this spline, and the outside is on the transmission case. And then this part is bolted to the back of the transmission. You have to go to that video and look to see that. Now in here, remember, cleanliness is what's going to make your transmission function the way it should. Failure to clean the transmission and maintain foreign and not allowing foreign contaminant from getting in here is what's going to be a good transmission rebuild. So what we want to do is we always want to lubricate the seal when we're going to place it back into its location. So since this already has lubrication on it, you see it seats right perfectly in position. So what I want to do, I just want to get that action for it to move forward and back. This way I know the seal is perfectly seated in there. And this is the other one. So we have seen these seals already. And you see, you got to look for these ball bearing. Actually, these are to allow the bleed off of the hydraulic fluid when it's being released, when the shift solenoid is disengaged, and that will open the passageway, I should say close the passageway. Now that the passageway is closed, there is no hydraulic fluid coming in to the drum. So this ball is what's going to bleed off that fluid. And when that fluid bleed off, this spring will be able to push this assembly back, releasing the clutch and allow to engage another set of clutch. So again, we have to go back and place our tool in position. But what we first want to do is we want to make sure we drop our ring in first, and then we're going to place the tool and attach our assembly. So this is the part you're going to have to be extremely careful with, because you don't want to damage those springs and placing these parts back together. So what we're going to use is the low side for catching the shaft, because it's a minimum travel. So that's why you need the proper tool, because what's the problem here is the shaft is not long enough, but we could cut this down to shorten its thickness. So this tool could be able to catch the threads, but it's still possible because you just have to press down and it will eventually get a bite of the threads, and then you could just walk this down. Now you have to remember to check your C-clip. So we have established connection with the shaft. Now we can turn this on the side, compress that spring plate. Now if you really want to know the name, the perfect name for what's being assembled here, you could go into the factory service manual and you will be able to find that. So again, what's preventing us from going down is the C-clip falls into the groove. So we have to release, not all the way, just for freeing that C-clip. See, we just don't want the C-clip to fall in the channel, and that's what's happening. When it falls in the channel, the spring cannot be compressed down. So What we're going to have to do is just going to have to hold this up in the air with our hand. Okay, so I had to use a magnet for trying to get this C-clip out from where it was stuck. But most of the time you're going to have to take this assembly apart and just try to get this C-clip back up, because it's very, very important that it just don't lay down in there when you're compressing the piston. So this is where you're going to have to use your fingers, and you see you don't want to place it in a position where you can maneuver it, but you also want to make sure that it does not fall in the groove. So now we're going to have to take this and roll it on the side gently. Always have to check on this C-clip, making sure it's free. It does not fall into the groove. You don't want it to fall into the groove, because if that happens, the piston will not move back into position. So to prevent that from happening, we're just going to center our PVC. We're going to flip this whole thing down, and then you're going to feel in the bottom, making sure that the C-clip falls to the top. And now we're going to turn this so we can compress that spring. Now we can turn this back over, take a look in there, and we can see we have achieved what we wanted, and that's pushing that spring back as far as we can, that spring plate, so we could get this C-clip in position. Now, like I said before, this is going to take some time, so you have to be patient in doing this part. Experience helps a lot. If you've been doing it for a while, it really helps. Now in the process of trying to fit that C-clip, you're going to want to get a C-clip tool. Good luck with that. But what you're going to have to do is stabilizing this. So you want to place it on something like that. So now you could use your 2 screwdriver, like a chopstick, for fitting that C-clip into location. So like I said before, you gotta have some patience for this. Now the only reason we're having a difficult time installing the C-clip is because the PVC pipe that we're using for compressing is a little too small in diameter. So if you could get something a little more larger in diameter, but to still hold the piston, the ring, the spring ring, and you will have much better success than we are having here. Okay, so I had to take some time for releasing and recentering this PVC pipe, because if it's too close on one end or far away on another, it's not going to allow the C-clip to get into the channel. That's it. It's locked into position. So not much editing was done here for fitting that C-clip, as you can see. But what's important is that you're going to want to make sure that you center your tool, that ring, that would be this ring on the top. So now you can see that there's a part of the C-clip here still out. And we have just completed the installation. Now, if you want to check your assembly to making sure that it moves back and forth, you could take high compressed air, approximately 90 psi, and try to pass it in through these holes. And you're going to see that this is going to just come forward and goes back. This piston on the outside here. And that's going to let you know that your installation is successful. But since we don't have any shop air around here, I will have to trust my work and go with what we have done. So now we want to reassemble the parts that we have taken out. And like we have said before, we want to place this wave plate. This has to be on the back always, because that's what's going to absorb some of the impact when the clutch is engaged. So now what we have here, you can see that this steel plate don't want to drop into position. That's because the channel for the piston and outside have to be aligned. So this could be easily done just by shifting it with the tool. So you have to check for that. Now you're going to be able to look at your plate. This one, it doesn't matter which side is up or down, but you see it says P on this side, so the P will go to the bottom. And then we will place our clutch. Then we have another steel plate, and you can place the P on that for the top. So we have another steel plate. So you see we have two steel plate in one location. Sometime you're able to drop an additional clutch and a much thinner steel plate to get a heavy duty action from the transmission. I'm going to place this one in. So carefully taking an inspection. I would replace these clutches, but it looks like you could get another 100,000 miles out of it, because remember, you're going to get new fluid once this transmission is being put together. So now that we have that in place, we want to get our C-clip again, our snap ring. Sometimes some guys like to call it a snap ring. Now you have to remember when you're going to be assembling this stuff, you see these clutches have to be, all the teeth has to be aligned, so the next assembly could be dropped right into position. Now here we have another wave plate that we're going to drop in. Remember, the wave plate is always on the bottom, and we're simply removing it the way we did. You see we have that P here, so you can place the P on the top and the bottom, but this one shows for the bottom because you can see the line of the clutch is on the outside, and when you look on the back you don't really see it. This is the line for the clutch, the fiber clutch, which I have in my hand here. So place that. Now we take a look at this one. We're looking for that P. See? So it goes to the bottom. You can put it to the top if you want. It's all, I guess, preference. That's another clutch liner. And you see this one has a P for the top. So you can see the person who assembled this before me didn't really pay attention to that. It's not really something that you need to. There's the P again. But it's always good to pay attention to everything, especially when you're rebuilding a transmission. That one, this one, there's our P. It's another clutch liner. There's another P. It's another clutch liner. So again, all this has to be aligned. I just want to pull them together to make it easy, so when we put this stuff back together, it's nice and easy. Now what's important is all those steel plates that we drop in must be shined like this. You don't want to have like black dots or darkened spots on some area, because that will tell you that this transmission was at some point low on fluid, and that low fluid situation will cause it to burn that steel plate. So this is the first C-clip. When we take a look at this, you can see we have two grooves there. The first one to hold the assembly, and the second one for the other assembly that's going to come encounter with this one. So we're going to place this one. You can't forget this snap ring, this second snap ring, just because, oh, you have one in there already, and you're going to be assuming that first snap ring is holding the whole assembly together, that you don't need this one. You need this one because, remember, the next assembly that's going to go in here, this snap ring is going to prevent it from colliding with these rotating clutch. So this is complete, or disassemble and assemble of the forward drum clutch assembly. And like I say, there's two sets of clutch in here, and those are the those are the Overrun clutch assembly and the forward clutch assembly. So the first set on top would be the forward clutch assembly, and the second set on the bottom is our Overrun clutch assembly. So thank you for watching this video. Hope to see you again in many more of our repair videos. This is just to show you what is necessary and required in building your transmission. So in the event you should need to do so, you could consult with the factory service manual, and also I hope this video is able to help you to show you how to assemble and disassemble so you don't cut yourself in there and bleed on your hands. Thank you. Don't forget to look at the video description. You're going to see more videos on other drum assembly, like the reverse drum, and we have a few others that are going to have to be disassembled to show you how to replace the piston rubber seal. Very important, because if that piston don't move back and forth, it cannot engage and disengage these clutches for shifting.